All right, my name is Daniel Cunningham. I am a horticulturist with Rooted In, and just wanted to thank y'all again for joining us for our program tonight, Go and Grow Gardening Made Easy, where we will dig a little deeper into our Go and Grow gardens in a box. Before we get started, though, did want to introduce y'all to our new website at Rooted In, where you can purchase your Go and Grow boxes, as well as find some free resources on different gardening related subjects. You can sign up for many classes ranging from composting, vegetable gardening, native plants, rainwater harvesting, irrigation, as well as finding information for our blogs and our podcast and different gardening guides that we have there. And then there are some other products as well as the Go and Grow Garden in a Box. But again, you can find that at rootedin.com. I do want to take some time to thank our sponsors this evening. We've got Save Dallas Water, North Texas Municipal Water District, Tarrant Regional Water District, and Upper Trinity Regional Water District, who we've partnered with in developing this program, Go and Grow Gardening Made Simple. And so really the point of this program is to kind of explain more about what the garden in a box is and how you can be successful planting your box garden. Now, one of the reasons that we got started with this Go and Grow Garden in a Box is we get a lot of questions from beginning gardeners and sometimes more seasoned gardeners who are interested in landscape design, questions about plant selection and maintenance, and then a lot of questions on, okay, you've recommended these right plants, but where can I actually buy them? Where can I find the plants? And sometimes, especially in years like this year's where plants and gardening are very popular, that has been a challenge. And so, people would just say, just tell us what to plant and tell us where we can find it. And so that's kind of how we have developed this program. Now, we do have 4 boxes in total. 2 of those are available now in the spring. Our Texas Tough Native Garden, where each one of the plants in that is a native plant or a nativar. We also have our Home Harvest Edible Garden, and all of the plants in there are herbs or vegetables that have some type of culinary value, and you can purchase each of those right now for $75. And you can find that at rootedin.com/shop. So just some more garden details. Each one of those boxes comes with 32 starter plants and 3-inch pots. The gardens themselves in the box are about 2 foot by 1 foot. You'll, of course, space them out wider than that, but that's how they come kind of packed in that box, so they'll easily fit inside any vehicle. We also, with our kit gardens or garden in a box, sends 3 plant by number layouts. So these are 3 designs that come included in that $75. We have a 5 foot by 25 foot rectangle, a 16 by 16 foot triangle, and then a 14 foot circle. And those designs we'll dig deeper in, but were designed by our professional in-house landscape designer. Each one of the boxes covers about 125 square feet, and the plants inside the box have a mature height ranging from 1 to 5 feet. Our exposure ranges from full sun to part shade. So we'll talk about more about that going forward and the amount of sunlight you need for your box. And the benefit is that they have colorful blooms from spring into fall. They're also locally grown, all native and adapted varieties, and many pollinator supporting species. In fact, in the fall, we'll have a shade box and a pollinator box available for sale as well. Now, each one of the boxes also comes with easy to follow instructions. So even if you're not a green thumb, if you've struggled to keep plants alive, Not only have we designed the boxes for plants that are super easy to grow, that will set you up for success, as well as the designs to show you how to plant them in the right way, but they're also included easy to follow instructions that will really help you dig deeper into your gardening hobby. Now, the first box that I wanted to dig into today is the Home Harvest Edible Garden. That comes with 1 rosemary, 2 tricolor sage, 3 oregano, 3 pineapple sage, one of the balsamic blooms basil. This was one the past 3 years. It's been really the most sought after basil cultivar, and so we're really excited to offer that one to you. We also have a cardinal basil, which is a very similar basil, has a little bit of a spicier flavor. Garlic chives, we have 3 of those. One of the best spearmint, so it's a spearmint that is one of the best cultivars, which gives it that name. And then we also have pineapple mint, chocolate mint, 3 lemon thymes, and then 3 Mexican tarragon, which is an amazing bloomer. It's also a delicious herb as well. Now, I did wanted to introduce those 3 designs. You'll see here is the 16 by 16 foot triangle design. So if you have maybe it's a corner in between a fence and a sunny part of your yard, or maybe it's the end of a yard in an area where, maybe there was turf grass there before and you're not excited about having a large lawn. You'd rather grow some of your own food. This kitchen garden is perfect for that space. There's also a rectangle design. Again, this could be perfect along a walkway. That could be a great spot, maybe right outside your back door where you have easy access to those herbs and vegetables. And then we have a circle garden. So if you have a bed that is already in the shape of a circle, or perhaps you would like to create a bed that's in the shape of a circle, we have a design that works well with that one too. And each of those comes free with your Go and Grow garden in a box. Now, rosemary, most folks are familiar with. Unfortunately, we had some rosemary that was damaged during the last freeze. And so you may want to replace your rosemary. And this cultivar gets about 3 foot or 4 foot tall and about 3 foot wide. It's nice because it's an evergreen, providing year-round interest, also year-round snacking, and you can use it around the holidays when some of our other plants have died back. But this one is ARP. It's a nice bushy cultivar of rosemary and has exceptional flavor. You can read more about that in your gardening guide when you purchase your box. But a great herb that not only tastes great and smells great, but also has some beautiful blooms to boot. The other one I mentioned was tricolor sage, and this is a really interesting variegated culinary sage. It tastes almost identical to the sage you would use around your Thanksgiving turkey. This one has kind of a cream color yellow as well as purple. And then when we get cooler temperatures outside, you'll see kind of more of that purple shining through. It gets about a foot and a half tall by a foot and a half wide. Again, it's another evergreen. A lot of people don't realize, though, that these culinary sages do provide some beautiful blooms in the summer months, and so it is ornamentally very attractive, as well as great for any type of chicken or fish dish, or it also does well in cocktails if you're interested, whether it's a mocktail or cocktail in a summertime drink. The other plant we have is Greek oregano. Now, this is a great semi-evergreen plant, so it stays evergreen for most of the winter unless we get really cold weather. It might nip it back a bit. It has interesting white flowers that bloom in July, also a great attractant for a number of pollinator species. Gets about a foot by a foot tall and wide. Uh, Traditionally oregano is used in sauces and tomato dishes, on pizza, or perhaps Mexican salads and soups. But again, a great herb that not only looks great, but tastes great. In fact, we had one of these planted in our demonstration garden, and people would walk by and see it for its ornamental value, but they just couldn't place the plant. They would look at it and say it looks familiar, but in an ornamental setting, they didn't recognize because it looks so great, but also if it's not in an herb garden, people may not necessarily recognize oregano by its beautiful foliage. Pineapple sage is another great herb. It's one of the most spectacular blooming herbs that grows in our area. It can reach a mature height of up to 3 to 4 feet and about 2 to 3 feet spread, blooming August until October. And as the name suggests, the flowers and the foliage on this one smell like pineapple, and so it kind of imparts that tropical flavor and feel into not only it could be using poultry or fish, or perhaps even in a salad or in a cocktail. And we talk more about that in the description that you can read on our website. Now, I mentioned balsamic blooms basil. This is the hottest basil on the market, and you can see why. It's got amazing blooms, and the sepals of those blooms really kind of contrast with the rich purples. Blooms June to November. The foliage on this one tastes very similar to a Genovese basil or an Italian basil, so you can use it in pestos and to kind of garnish pizzas or any type of Mediterranean cuisine, tear it and throw it into a salad. Um, but not only does this plant taste great, it is one of the most ornamental herbs that we've found, and it is extremely hard to find. There's kind of a story behind that, but the company that first released it went bankrupt, and so that patent went away, and now we're one of the few places that can actually offer that to you this year. There's also a cardinal basil that you'll see looks very similar. This is has flavors more on the Thai side, the Thai basil, so it's a little bit more spicy. The entire plant's edible. You can sprinkle it onto salads, or you could use the foliage in soups and stews. It gets about 1.5 feet tall and wide, and blooms in full sun to part sun June through November as well. Now, garlic chives are an incredible ornamental herb. They have these beautiful white flowers. It's a very vigorous plant, and so once you have them, it's very easy to divide those and spread them into other kind of trouble spots in the landscape. So if you've had trouble, growing other herbs, this is one that most anybody can grow. It's also nice because it's evergreen and it does bloom and provide interest during the cooler months. Does well in full sun to part shade and blooms August into September. You can use it for any recipe that calls for chives. So you could put it on a baked potato, or you could, put it in kind of top as a garnish on chicken or fish or beef. Vegetarian dishes, just brings out those nice garlic notes. And then we also have spearmint. Spearmint is a super tough herb that does good in full sun to part shade. Blooming July to August is a great plant for a variety of different pollinators. It gets about 1 foot tall by 1 foot to 2.5 foot wide, so it kind of is low growing and spreads. The leaves have a strong spearmint fragrance, so it's nice to you put it next to a walking path, and as you brush by it, you can actually smell that nice minty fragrance, as well as spearmint taste, so you can use it for teas or in salads or in a variety of different Mediterranean and Asian cuisines. We also have an interesting variegated mint. This one is pineapple mint, and it's known for its kind of white to cream colored variegations on the foliage, a little bit more rough textured than the spearmint we just saw. Again, it gets about 1 foot tall to maybe 2 foot wide, so it is a spreading plant. Blooms July to August, semi-evergreen. So again, like the other mints we've talked about, it does well in the cooler months until we get a really kind of a hard frost, then that may nip it back, but it comes back each spring. And it's really neat on this one. It has kind of a pineapple-like aromatic, sweet, tropical note. Some people think it tastes more like citrus, but you can use it to flavor teas, as a garnish for cocktails, or even as an aromatic in potpourris. So if you wanted to dry some, you could use it inside your house to kind of impart that pineapple citrusy smell. Chocolate mint is another mint that a lot of people really like. This one is a hybrid between a peppermint, and so you'll get really kind of the strong peppermint-like flavor that's refreshing, but then it has kind of a little bit of a chocolate aftertaste to it. Also has kind of a darker purple or red stem, which is interesting in terms of ornamental value. This one grows a little bit shorter, about half a foot to a foot tall, and about 1 foot to a foot and a half wide. Again, it's a semi-evergreen that thrives in full sun to part shade. And it's, in addition to being delicious for us, it also has those same great blooms that are attractive to many of our pollinators. Now, lemon thyme is another variegated herb that is highly ornamental. It's got kind of the edges that are cream to white colored here, so it really makes that foliage pop in contrast for some of the darker leaved greens that we've included in our kit. This lemon thyme is primarily used for its leaves, but its flowers are also attractive for people and pollinators. You can use it as a seasoning to brighten chicken or fish dishes, or even use the fresh sprigs to garnish a tea or cocktail. So you could do a sweet tea, throw a little bit of thyme in there, really sets it off. Or I feel like I'm saying the word cocktail too much, and I promise you this is just water. But it is really nice to impart flavors into drinks, summertime drinks, whether they have alcohol or not. Mexican tarragon is one of my favorite ornamental herbs. It gets a little bit taller than some of the others we've talked about 3 foot by 3 foot high and wide. Again, it's a semi-evergreen, so when we do get very cold temperatures, it dies back. But my favorite way to use this, so it's great for its foliage, which kind of blooms during the fall monarch migration. You'll see monarchs that will stop to use this one as a nectar source. But my favorite way to use it is in chicken salads. In fact, I don't really like traditional French tarragon as much. To me, Mexican tarragon has a more mild flavor, and my favorite chicken salad recipe calls for cranberries and Mexican tarragon, and just makes the perfect kind of summertime sandwich. The flavor breaks down more quickly when heated, and so a lot of times people will add this at the end of cooking. But it does really well in our soils and is a really easy to grow, vigorous plant. Now let's talk about our second box, and that is our native box that we call the Texas Tough Native Garden. And that one we have the apricot autumn sage, and autumn sage is a super tough Texas native plant, but the apricot color is one that is not as easily found on the market, and so we wanted to offer something a little bit more unique, but extremely drought tolerant, super tough plant. We also have our flame acanthus, otherwise known as hummingbird bush, white mistflower, which is the fall blooming kind of cousin to the blue flower that you know. This one has a white flower. White gara, or sometimes called butterfly gara, Texas lantana, our Texas native shrubby lantana. Then we have two Texas rock rose, which was one of my favorite plants last year in my personal garden. We've got low growing right skullcap, which is a great border plant, super great for pollinators. Then our Henry Dulberg salvia, which is a beautiful long blooming native plant. Zexminia, we've got three of those in there, which provide contrast with their yellow blooms. Then we have fall aster, which are one of the greatest showstoppers in the garden during the cooler months. And then we've got three Blackfoot daisy, which not only do they smell fantastic during the summer, but really add kind of a pure white contrast with their white flowers, and then the kind of centers that are yellow. We do have three designs there as well. So we'll show you here just the triangle design. Again, great for a sunny corner. We also have the circle design, which is really nice, kind of circular, flowing. You can kind of walk around the garden and see everything happening from each side. Or we do have the rectangle design there. And you can pick from each of those, or you could kind of come up with your own design. We've heard about people doing that as well. The apricot autumn sage, again, about 2 to 3 foot tall and wide. It is semi-evergreen, so it only dies back really when we get the coldest weather. It's called autumn sage, but it blooms all through spring, summer into autumn. It is one of the best native plants to attract bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies. And again, the cultivar apricot is one of our favorites. It produces dense flushes of those kind of smoky pink or apricot colored blooms. The second plant on the list I mentioned is flame acanthus. This one is kind of a sub-shrub, gets about 3 foot tall and wide, and produces these clusters of firecracker-like red blooms, deeply throated. It is a perfect plant for attracting hummingbirds and butterflies, blooming spring, summer into fall. It's also extremely easy to grow, especially in sunny spots that have good drainage. And, if you have the spot on the west side of your home where nothing seems to grow, this native box is the perfect box or perfect garden for that space. Now, white mistflower is more of a shrubby mistflower. It only blooms in the fall, but when it does, it is completely covered in these white blooms. And right at the same time, when the monarchs come through with their fall migration, so it's kind of the stop sign for them. But you'll count dozens of different bees and butterflies, a number of different species that use this as a nectar source. It is a deciduous plant, so it does die back in the winter, but for most of the year, it's got really elegant, dark green, glossy foliage that's a nice contrast in the garden. And so then when it blooms, it just really sets it off. Another plant included in your box is the white gaura, sometimes called whirling butterfly gaura. And you'll notice that the flowers on this almost look like butterflies kind of dancing in the wind with their anthers looking like antenna. Gets about 2 to 3 feet tall by about 1 to 2 feet wide, blooms spring, summer into fall, does well in full sun to part shade. And its foliage is also interesting on this one. So when we do start to see cooler temperatures, you'll notice kind of reds and purples in the foliage. And this one is also a frequent stop for a variety of our pollinators looking for nectar in the garden. Texas lantana is the larger shrubby lantana, so it can get 3 foot or more in height by about 2 to 5 foot wide. Bloom spring, summer into fall, these clusters of kind of tubular orange and yellow flowers that do a great job of attracting hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees. Most of the lantana that are kind of the smaller, more compact, those died with our heavy freeze event or -2, -4 degrees Fahrenheit we saw recently, but our Texas lantana are tough and are adapted to our heavy clay soils, our droughts. These are extremely tough. And so once you get this plant established, it's going to come back and bloom year after year for seasons to come. Texas rock rose, a great adapted native plant that grows about 3 foot by 3 foot, blooming spring, summer into fall. It does a good job blooming in full sun to part shade, attracting bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies. And this plant is really a showstopper with those kind of bright pink hibiscus-like blooms. It is a member of the hibiscus family. And when it is, this picture doesn't do it justice, but when it is happy and blooming, you'll see it just completely covered with those pink blooms. Right skullcap. So this one we've seen a lot more interest in the nursery trade. More people are starting to spec this for landscape designs, but it is a great border plant, low grower, gets about 1 foot tall by 1 to 2 foot wide, produces beautiful purple flowers, which are great at attracting a number of native bees and butterflies. And this is going to bloom kind of in cycles all through spring, summer, into fall. It's also evergreen, so it does provide some interest along those pathways or along the borders of your beds year round. So just a great, super drought tolerant, beneficial plant, and is an extremely dense bloomer as well. When this is covered in blooms, it really is a sight to see. Now, this is our favorite cultivar of Salvia mealy blue sage, Henry Dulberg, and the story is that our friend Greg Grant found this growing on a grave in East Texas next to Augusta Dulberg, his wife, which was a all-white cultivar. This one has blues in the calyx as well as in the flowers. Extremely prolific bloomer, blooms all spring, summer into fall, and is a great attractant for our bees, specifically bumblebees, as well as butterflies. But the big plant gets 2 foot by 3 foot or so, and will be completely covered in pollinators when it's blooming throughout the growing season. Zexminia, this plant doesn't get enough love, but it's kind of a subshrub, gets 2 foot by 2 foot, kind of mounding shape, semi-evergreen, but will, when it's happy, especially after a rainfall event, will produce these kind of aster-like yellow blooms spring, summer, into fall, and is extremely versatile. So no matter the soil type or what the kind of watering regime is, it is just tough. In fact, it's got the name miracle plant because it is so adapted to a variety of conditions. Fall aster is another fantastic plant in this box, and just walking around my neighborhood in the fall as these begin to explode again, great for attracting monarchs as well as kind of a late bloomer nectar source for a variety of bees. Birds will also use the seeds as a food source over the winter, but just a fantastic plant. It is deciduous, but for a large part of the year, it has really interesting kind of spiny like foliage. And so it's an attractive plant in its own right, but it's just like the crescendo of like a July 4th fireworks show that you see in kind of November, December. It will just start popping these blooms, is exploding. Just a amazing, amazing plant when it's blooming. I can't tell you how many times people will stop and be like, "What is this plant? What is this plant?" Because they don't recognize it for most of the year, but the 3 or 4 months when it's really showy is it's really amazing. Now, Blackfoot daisy is the final plant that we've included in our Texas native box garden. This one gets a 1 foot tall by 2 foot wide. It's spreading. I have this one planted along my driveway in kind of a sloped area in the west side that gets, it's kind of this heat island. It's hard to keep that area moist even after it's been raining because, it drains so well there, and it's kind of the hot spot in the landscape, and that's where Blackfoot daisies thrive. So again, this box, if you have a spot that you've tried other plants in the past and it's got sun and heat, this is a great plant to kind of fill that niche. It has a sweet smell to the flowers. Some people say it reminds them of honey. For me, it's kind of a little bit like vanilla. And so that is nice, especially if it's blooming in the morning or in the evening. It kind of imparts those aromatics to the garden or the landscape. I used to joke around that this plant, if you listen closely in June, July, and August, when all your other plants are kind of withering and they just can't handle the Texas heat, if you listen closely, you can hear the Blackfoot daisy laughing because that is the type of weather where it really thrives. So that was just a quick overview of the two Go and Grow boxes that we have available right now. If you're already sold on picking one up, you may be asking, well, what can I do right now to kind of set myself up for success with that garden? And the first thing we want to do is pick the right spot. So again, you can use a location that works for you in terms of the design principles that we include in our designs, the rectangle, the square, the circle, or you can actually kind of do a custom design and fill in the spots that you have in your landscape. We do want to bring some pitfalls up, and you know, a lot of times landscapes in North Texas are overwatered, over fertilized, over applied with pesticides. And not only are those practices harmful to your landscapes, they can also be harmful to our environment as some of those pollutants run off of our landscape. So these boxes have really been designed where they don't need a lot of extra fertilizer. They don't need a lot of extra water once established, and they shouldn't need pesticides because these plants are extremely adapted to our area, and so they tend to resist pest and disease that we would normally see with maybe some of our less adapted plants. So we would really kind of err on the side of less water, less fertilizer, less application of different pesticides to really set yourself up for success. And if you do have any issues with any one of those things, certainly you can reach out to us and we'll help you to be more successful in the garden. But it's better to let these plants, once they're established, kind of do their thing, and that will set you up for success. And the other bonus there, that in addition to the ecological benefits of saving water and saving money on different fertilizers and pesticides, you can create this relaxing outdoor space where you can check out the butterflies as well as the beautiful blooms, and then you can actually snack on some of the plants. So it's kind of, there's a lot of benefits there. Now, selecting the proper location, it's key to identify the amount of sunlight that these plants require and the amount of sunlight that you have on your property. The edible box that we've talked about is designed to thrive in full sun to part sun conditions. So that means, 8 to 12 hours of sunlight in full sun, and then down to, maybe 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours of sunlight for kind of the part sun conditions there. So really, if you don't have at least 6 hours of sunlight, you probably want to wait and hold off to our shade garden that we have available in the fall. Now, our native box is designed also for those full sun to part sun conditions. And don't worry, we will help you find the right spot for your landscape. Now, I also wanted to make a little bit of a note is, depending on the time of year, the sun's path actually is going to be a little bit different around your house. Now, of course, we know that the sun rises in the morning and it sets in the evening, but the path of the sun at 12 o'clock kind of changes a little bit season to season. And so in the summer, the sun is more at its peak, kind of right above our house. And then in the spring and the fall, it's kind of in that midpoint. In the winter, it's kind of all the way in the southern sky. And so the shadows that that home is casting also changes based on the season. So when you're trying to design your landscape right now in the spring and the fall, and you're looking at how much sunlight is there, also pay attention to, does that sunlight actually change, kind of waning in the summer and the winter? And if you can really target that to make sure that it gets at least 6+ hours of sunlight, that's going to set yourself up for the best success with your go and grow, either your shade box or your edible box. Now, the tools needed for best results, we want to have access to a tape measure. Perhaps if you're doing the circle design, you might need some wooden stakes, some string, or perhaps a garden hose to help you lay out that spot, especially if you're going to remove turf grass or any current vegetation there. You just need a shovel or a hand trowel. These are 3-inch plants when they come. Now, of course, they could get 2 foot by 2 foot or maybe even 4 foot in one season, but they're very compact and easy to plant with even a hand trowel when you first get them. You also may want to consider, if it's compacted soil, using a spade fork or a tiller, or if you're going to incorporate compost into there. You could also just top dress with compost, but some people do like to just kind of disturb the soil a little bit to incorporate the compost. And then make sure you have access to water. That is key. If you have access to a faucet nearby and a garden hose that's long enough to reach the garden, certainly that is one way to irrigate. Or you may want to consider using soaker hose or drip irrigation to kind of automate that. So if you went out of town, or maybe you had to, you could set it up where you could just press a button and you could water for 30 minutes or something with your drip irrigation, so you don't forget about leaving your hose or sprinkler on. Now, I mentioned compost, and we do recommend adding compost whether you live in a spot in North Texas that has heavy clay soil or a spot that has more sandy soil. It's one of the best ways to improve drainage, encourage beneficial soil fertility, as well as buffering our high pH levels that some of us have. Compost is really just a nutrient-rich soil conditioner that is made from organic material. It's not necessarily a fertilizer, but it works like fertilizer insurance. So all the nutrients that are needed for plant growth can be found inside the compost, but it takes a little bit while for it to break down for those plants to actually be able to take it up. So that's why we call it more of a fertilizer insurance. For new beds, we encourage people to apply up to 1 to 2 inches and to incorporate that into the top 3 to 6 inches of soil. You can use a spade, a shovel, or a tiller. Now you can just top dress with a half an inch to an inch of compost if you don't want to till it in, but it takes a while for the beneficial microbes and earthworms and organisms to kind of cycle that organic matter in the compost into the soil. So if you're just doing a one-time till, or maybe just even opening up the soil with a spade fork, that could help encourage that compost to enter into the soil. Now, you could definitely buy compost in most of your local nurseries. In fact, there are also some bulk suppliers of compost that will actually deliver it to your home for a very affordable price. But it is something that you could and should be doing at home, something that you would normally just be throwing away, vegetable scraps and perhaps leaves from your landscape. You can visit rootedin.com to find more about how you can get started composting at your home. Now, generally, we do recommend people planting the plants in their Go and Grow box within 1 to 4 days after receiving them. One of the biggest reasons we would do that is we're seeing warmer temperatures kind of as we head into spring, and those 3-inch by 3-inch pots tend to dry out faster. And so, if you put them inside the soil is more resilient. It has the organic matter that works as a sponge, and it takes a longer time for the soil to dry out than in the pot themselves. And so if we get them in the ground, those plants are going to be more resilient. Now, not to say you couldn't put them on the east side of your home and keep them irrigated and wait a few more days to that, then plant them. We know everyone has busy schedules, but the name of the game, if you want to be successful, is to put them in the ground as quick as possible, and then that will help them start establishing a nice root system, and will create a resilient garden for you. Now, generally, we recommend folks to have your prepared bed ready, get your box, and then just start laying it out by the designs. Now, it's really an easy plant by numbers design, or each one of the design. And so each plant has a tag inside that has a color and a number. And that color and number corresponds with that design that you have. And so you're just saying, okay, here's red 2. I'm going to take my plant with red 2 and put it in that spot. And then after you've laid all those 24 plants out, you can make slight adjustments, based on where you put it. You don't have to follow it to a T. You can be a little bit flexible just to make sure each of the plants has enough room to grow at maturity. Now, proper planting, we kind of see here that that what I was talking about there with the color and number combination and the plant tags inside each of them. And really, if you can play, Battleship, or if you can play Go Fish, it's basically just like you're putting your plants in your landscape with those same principles. Now, for best results, we want to dig our holes only as deep as the plants are in the container. If we dig our hole too deep and we plant a plant too deep and the leaves are touching the ground, that would be a chance for perhaps disease to be picked up on the plant. Also, it kind of can contribute to poor drainage. If we plant a plant too high in the ground where the roots are actually above the soil, then those roots can slough off and that creates undue stress for the plant. So really what we want to do is plant it kind of right at that base level, the same level of where the plant is growing in the container. Now, when you're removing the plant from the container, just gently squeeze the bottom of the plant until you see that container kind of pull loose. We don't want to just yank and pull it out, so squeeze the base a little bit and then kind of gently pry it out of its container. And then you're just going to place it in the soil, backfill with the native soil, and push it down just kind of gently. We don't want to over compact the soil, but make sure that we have good root to soil contact so there's not any air pockets in there. And then the next step is just to water about an inch of water. What we want to do is make sure that the entire planting area is wet to about a depth of 6 to 8 inches. So what you may want to do is apply about a half an inch of water with a water hose, wait for a little bit, let that water soak in, and then apply another half an inch of water to there, or maybe it only takes another quarter inch of water, just to make sure that those plants are well watered in from day one. Now, the good news is that once the plants are established, they're going to be very efficient water users, not requiring a lot of irrigation. One way that we can help that is by mulching 2 to 4 inches. And so that would be the next step. After your plants are in the ground, you could use straw, you could use leaves, you could use pine straw, wood chips, whatever mulch that you want. But make sure that the mulch is 2 to 4 inches around the plant, but that the base of the plant where the stem reaches the ground, that has enough airflow around it. We don't want to see the picture here on the left where you have mulch kind of up next to the base of the plant, because that can contribute to pest problems. So we just want to make sure that, yes, it is 2 inches thick, but it is kind of tapered off and not a lot of mulch is packed around the base of the plant. But the benefits is that's going to help suppress weeds, help buffer soil temperatures, so keep the soil cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. And also it's going to help retain moisture. So that means that you can go longer periods without irrigating. So it's a lot of benefits to applying mulch. Now, as we continue to watch our plants grow in the first few weeks, you're going to want to water them. Hand watering definitely works well, but any method that evenly distributes the water to the soil around your plants is about 6 inches deep or so is where that's wet. You can get a soil moisture probe to help you with that, or you could use a screwdriver, maybe just even your finger, to make sure that you're actually watering till the roots at the bottom of the plant are wet. That's going to encourage them to grow deeper. The deeper those roots grow by infrequent watering is going to make them more heat tolerant and drought tolerant. Now, it's going to take some time for them to establish and kind of get to that stage. So we want to check that moisture every 3 to 4 days, again, using your finger or a soil moisture probe. Now, long-term irrigation, we do recommend drip irrigation. It's extremely cost-effective, and the actual drip tubing lasts forever. So once you invest in it, it's going to last you, season after season, years, maybe even decades. And so it's 90% efficient, meaning that 90% of the water that comes out of drip irrigation actually goes into the soil. So that's beneficial for your plants, where overhead irrigation, if it's not done the right way or at the right time, up to 60% of the water can be lost to evaporation. And that's water you're paying for that's not actually going into the root zone. So we encourage people to water deeply and infrequently in order to really build efficiency in your garden. Now, a good rule of thumb is when you're checking every 3 or 4 days to look and see if it needs some extra water. Only water about a half an inch at a time. If we water too much more than that, then if the soil already has some moisture in it, especially with our heavy clay soils, it's hard to get water to infiltrate as fast as we're applying it. Now, drip irrigation helps with that, but if you're overhead watering, maybe just set out a tuna fish can in your garden, water till that tuna fish can is about half an inch, and then that should be enough to make sure that your entire planted bed is saturated to that depth of about 6 to 8 inches. Now, if it hasn't, these plants are established and it hasn't rained in a couple weeks, you may need to add a little bit more water than that, but generally about a half an inch to a 3/4 of an inch is all that we need to water after those plants are established. You could do in-ground irrigation systems, hose-in sprinklers, just the kind that have the gun that you spray. Drip irrigations and soaker hoses definitely are a great option there, more efficient with our water, but each one of those puts out water at different rates. And so if you use that tuna fish can and put it underneath the drip irrigation, or if you put it underneath, your hose sprayer, or maybe your pop-up sprinkler, that will help you estimate, how long it takes to get you that half an inch or maybe 3/4 of an inch of water. You can also find more information on how much to water your turf grass and more efficient ways to water your vegetable garden and your native perennial beds by visiting waterisawesome.com. It is a fantastic resource for everything water, plants, and gardening. Now, that is all that I had for this evening. Just a quick overview of the plants and how to get those in the ground.
We appreciate everybody joining us this evening. And like Daniel said, if you have any questions, please let us know. Ask us on our Facebook page, or you can email us. And also, this presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel.